Today we are going over Uncanny X-Men 299. And if my memory serves correctly, this was the first actual like mainstream X-Men comic book that I had ever owned. Up to this point, I was second or third grade, and at that point, I'd been introduced to the animated series, so I was reading the X-Men Adventures because it followed the show, so it gave me something to relate to. However, when my friend would come over and stay the night, he would be reading like the regular X-Men run, not the Uncanny, but the one that Chris Claremont and Jim Lee started. And I was like, man, that thing's more violent. There's more action, and Wolverine looks brutal. So I wanted to get into it. And I kind of told my parents that I wanted different X-Men comics. So I remember going to my grandma's one day, and they handed me this one. And I got to say that looking back, I'm glad this was one of my first books that was part of the mainstream X-Men line. But oh my goodness, for a kid, I can't believe that this is what we were reading. So what do I mean by that? Let's dive into it. This is in the aftermath of 298 that we just recently went over, where the Acolytes destroyed that special needs school, and some longtime Claremont created characters died. So if you want to know what happened, read the book, check out the video, and come back. And you're back. And also in the pages of the main X-Men book, apparently Asteroid M was destroyed. So here we open up on this gorgeous page of Forge. I love the artwork here. It's so intricate, and I just think, man, we had it so good back in the day. We see someone stand over him and goes, so what do you think? That depends. You want me to be honest or reassuring? And we open up to this gorgeous mid splash page, and then we find out that this is Henry Geinrich, and this is called Nightlines. I love the way they did that, but the way it kind of gets smashed together, it's hard to read without the kerning and all that stuff. But anyway, let's talk about who made this before we go any further. This is Scott Liddell writing, Brandon Peterson penciler, Dan Pananosian doing the inks, Chris Ianopoulos doing the lettering, Marie Yavins doing the colors, Bob Harris was the editor, and Tom DeFalco was the editor-in-chief. So big names on this book. And what we found out that in the aftermath of the explosion of Asteroid M's, this is the remnants. And Forge says, no, I don't think you want to know the truth, Geinrich. You want me to tell you that you're wrong? Humor me. Make it official. Officially, what we have here, in all likelihood, are the remains of Asteroid M. Probably being it's roughly 2,000 times too big of for a landmass. Even after the explosions that took out 75% of the complex, it should have been reduced to cinders upon re-entry into Earth's orbit. The only way it could possibly still be intact is if something or someone guided these remains through the planet's atmosphere. Because at this point, everyone thinks that Magneto's dead. And considering the fact half of the marginally civilized nations of the world are frightened enough to agree to this multinational strike force, our list of suspects is understandably short. What about the Acolytes? None of his followers I've met have that kind of power. Certainly not any of those involved in yesterday's slaughter in New York, which says last issue. So they're going through it. And do we think this is a good idea to traipse through Asteroid M? And they said, we don't know if anybody's really alive. But Ford is like, you've found survivors? We're hoping you could tell us. And so we see Acolytes. Apparently, from the way I read this, let me read it to you, and then I'll kind of let you see what I understand. It says the man called Forge was in this room moments before an asteroid M exploded far above the green-washed planet Earth, and all on board were presumed killed. The statues genuflecting to the empty throne are easily recognizable as the Acolytes known only as Marie and Delgado, just as the empty husk in the center of the room could have only been, until recently, housed the body of the most dangerous mutant on Earth, Magneto, the master of magnetism. So this is just one creepy way to reintroduce one of the most powerful mutants in the world. And before we can find out any more about that, this is what I meant by I couldn't believe this was my first X-Men book. So we're now in New York, ABC Studios. Xavier's finally kind of come out of his seclusion after the events of the Executioner song, where Forge, dressed as Cable, almost killed him, which we will eventually go over the Executioner song. But what I like here is how Jean's like, I can't believe that you actually showered and shaved for this. He goes, I'm afraid such personal luxuries as privacy and physical appearance are not paramount on my list of priorities. We all appreciate your dedication, Professor, but you're still recovering from Stride's assassination attempt on your life. Yes, the very instant which propelled me, reluctantly, into the national spotlight. Although I'd much prefer to conduct my affairs in private, primarily my role as founder of the X-Men, my brush with martyrdom has altered my public persona from a world-renowned expert on genetics to what the media likes to call a mutant rights activist. So he's essentially going against Senator Kelly and what the hell is his name? Graydon Creed in this debate. And Gene says our detractors have been using the press to their advantage for years. Maybe it's time we had someone to counter the Senator Kellys of the world. And so this issue basically breaks down to a very heated debate on mutants' rights and the what the hell is Graydon Creed's Friends of Humanity or whatever it's called. And we'll get into that, but man, it gets heated, and I can't believe that kids my age were reading that and semi comprehending it because I couldn't tell you when I was a kid. I couldn't tell you what everything was about because you're young, you're naive. So anyway, before we get on to that, the one mutant that the acolytes didn't that were destroyed. I can't talk today. Not enough coffee, guys. The reason that they attacked the special needs school is there was a mutant in their midst, and they were going to take him to Magneto's lair because he's to inherit his birthright essentially. But then they found out that he had Down syndrome, and they considered him, what was it right here? Kyle. His name's not Kyle. What the hell's his name? Warren. It seems the acolytes didn't know that Teddy Matson's latent abilities when they attempted to kidnap him, no more than they knew that he had Down syndrome. In Uniscone's words, that made him unfit to take part in their new world order. Funny, as mutants, they, more than anybody, should know diversity is something to be celebrated, not ashamed of. And in that little panel, explains how humanity should be. It didn't take 4 or 5 pages of like soapboxes and stuff like that. Like, look at me, look at me. It's just one little text bubble talking about current affairs, even to this day, that we all should live in harmony. And it was all summed up perfectly in that panel. And then we move on. We see one of the mothers because they brought Teddy to the St. Mary's Boys Home, and she checks in and she sees Warren tucking him, and she goes, "You're the one they call Archangel." "Yes, Mother Superior. Don't bother calling the police. I'll be gone by the time they arrive." And while all this is happening, I love that, essentially in the Marvel timeline, Warren has not been Archangel that long, so he's still fighting with what happened to him at the hands of Apocalypse. She goes, "Son, not everyone believes that all mutants are to be feared and hated. There are those of us who are grateful to the X-Men for risking their lives on our behalf. Faith is important, but it's comforting to know with certainty the angels truly do walk among us. I appreciate the sentiment, Mother, but after everything I've done in my life, sometimes I think I'm beyond." And again, another little panel just encompassing humanity. Mother tells him, think about it, a lot of people would get really offended by this with faith. It's a beautiful thing used in this, in the Daredevil comics. She goes, he's saying that he thinks he's beyond redemption. And she just says, "There's no such thing," which is the truth. And it's just great to see it. In 3 little panels, we get just this hit in the emotions that we would get in Claremont books. But here it's Scott Liddell. Excellent storytelling right there. And the use of the paneling where she's just sitting there very calmly, patting his cheek, and then we see him in deep reflection. It's just good storytelling. So here, it gets wordy, but it's excellent. Again, storytelling, just because you think about it, it's basically 1, 2, 3, 4 people in a room for a majority of the rest of the issue. And you think, God, that get boring because you're basically watching a news interview. And it's not. The writing just keeps you encompassed because it is some heavy shit. Don't get me wrong. But he says that the mediator says, "Could it be, Professor, that their admittedly questionable actions are a justifiable response to the ever-growing numbers of anti-human factions among the Homo superior population? These acolytes, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, the Mutant Liberation Front, are but a few of the high-profile mutants who, regrettably, get the lion's share of media attention. Perhaps if the press were more inclined to focus on the exploits of other mutants, such as the X-Men, who have served the world on more than one occasion, Well, remember, there are many, many mutants who live peaceful, quiet lives, who go to work every day, who care for their families, and yet live in fear that people like Mr. Creed's associates will rip every inalienable right from them simply because of who they are. And he retorts, and he even calls out, because Senator Kelly, his wife passed. I don't remember what issue it was. If you guys can remember, let me know. But she died at the hands of mutants, and the X-Men tried to stop it. And he calls out, he goes, the professor's being disingenuous, which is in keeping with the reputation as a apologist for mutants. I think we'd be curious to hear Senator Kelly's feelings about the X-Men, the outlaws responsible for the death of his wife. Mr. Creed, I must say I resent that, as you've used my personal tragedy for a clever, sensible soundbite. Yes, my wife was killed in the midst of a mutant incident that included, among others, several X-Men. But there is no conclusive evidence that any X-Men in particular were responsible. It would be easy, comfortable, to paint me as a bitter, revenge-crazed man bent on pushing all mutants for the actions of a handful. I have not, and never will, advocate the blanket extermination of any race, mutant or otherwise. Genocide as a political agenda is as wrong today in countries like Bosnia and Somalia as it was in Germany over 50 years ago. While I'm all for finding a way to control the more scurrilous genetically challenged, and I believe in that without equivocation, without hesitation, it is vital we do so without trampling on their rights as American citizens. And I love how Xavier, and in the way that they paneled this, the way he just kind of seemed like he's standing alone with this distance between him and the antagonist, he goes, well spoken, Senator. And then there's a subplot with Cortez talking about how he was the one that murdered Apocalypse. We get Fitzroy and there's someone else, Shinobi Shaw. And it's talked about these little games that they're playing amongst themselves. It's a bit of rivalry. I don't want to get into it too much, but it kind of adds, it sort of breaks up the monotony of the book. It kind of lets you see what else is going on in the world, why all this is happening. Then the mediator continues to say, I'm sure I echo the sentiments of civilized people everywhere, Professor, when I say we're grateful you made a full recovery. But you must be aware there are others who are asking, hasn't he learned his lesson? You've done your part. You said that you felt you had to say, you said what you felt you had to say, and it almost cost you your life. Are you not going to be satisfied until you become a martyr for a cause that isn't even yours? Again, before we dive into this, this is an excellent way to bring real world situations into a comic that suit the story without, again, feeling like 3 pages of being preachy, or you guys know what I'm talking about. So let's get into it. Xavier says, the only thing more frightening than dying, Elton, is living in a world where one man is too frightened to help another. I must also object to your contention that this cause is not my own. A person does not need to be black to understand I cannot pronounce that word. Apartheid, I think is how you pronounce it, is wrong. People of all religions are rightfully horrified and repulsed by the crimes against the Jews during the Holocaust. Similarly, one need not be a victim of AIDS in order to have compassion for the thousands of people, those who have suffered and those who have died from this disease. When the time comes that people are restricted to help on their own, is the day I believe there will be no hope for any of us. One panel hits right down to the human core without feeling like the book has become a complete political platform. It's a way to kind of show people what's going on. And it's still true. This was 1993, I think. And we're in 2025, and that still rings true, that we all should be celebrating one another and not fighting and creating this division. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that because that's not what this channel's about. But anyway, remember how Xavier took a moment and said, I agree, very well spoken, Senator. Now he says, Senator Kelly kind of goes, I find myself agreeing with much of what Professor Xavier has said. So we see barriers coming down. And it's just an excellent way to show two men with completely different views able to come together and understand one another in this midst. Of course, Graydon Creed does not help the matters. He's very much the antagonist of the book. But it's just a beautiful way to show these people have been butting heads for years, finally able to kind of come together. We get another moment with Peter just kind of feeling dead inside because he's lost his parents. the brutal murder of his parents, the suicide of his brother, Peter Rasputin is taken to contemplating whether this power, this existence as an X-Man, is of any value. And apparently Ilyana is sick at this point. She has lost her powers as magic. She's regressed back to a kid. And this is being a dad now, this hits hard. I don't want to go too much into it because I kind of teared up when I read this, but she's sick, and Peter's realizing that this is the last piece of his family that he has left. And we'll be talking more about this later. Now, I'm glad that Scott Liddell brought some levity. Beast is a goofball, smart as attack, but can be a goofball. But I think the reason that they did what they did here is to kind of alleviate some of the pressure that we feel in this book, because while you're reading it, you're thinking, oh, damn, oh, damn, oh, damn. And so they bring Hank McCoy in. And he goes, Elton, Senator, Professor, greetings, and a hearty Sieg Heil to you, Mr. Creed. Poke fun if you'd like, Mr. McCoy. I'm a racist? It would take more ignorant man than me to argue such a point. Though I confess I didn't recognize you saying your hood and robes. Might suggest a logo, a burning DNA symbol, mayhap. Dr. McCoy, would you say your acceptance into the Avengers a few years ago was not indicative that the general public is catching up with the 20th century? Oh, my stars and garters, I hope so. But good golly, good gosh, Mr. and Mrs. America, it ain't no big deal. Why, statistically speaking, I bet if you look close enough, some of your best friends are mutants. And he just rips into it. And I think, too, just at this point, mutants are just sick of this stuff. So Hank very much just embodies it. And Graydon Creed's just going deep into him. And Beast is just like, here's an idea. Why don't all of us mutants start wearing scarlet M's on our clothes? Wait, I got it. Tattoos. You can stencil tattoos on our forearms. I refuse to sit here and be insulted by this freak. If you're leaving anymore, forgive me for fast forwarding to my final rebuttal as I say on behalf of mutants everywhere. I just love it. And Xavier's just like, oh, God. Oh. It is just very much a nice... After everything that we read, and of course everyone watching at Harry's Hideaway, which I miss Harry's Hideaway. It was just a great way, kind of how Claremont used baseball as a way to kind of break up heavy issues. Harry's Hideaway was kind of the same thing, so I kind of missed that. It also starts a side thing building up with Bishop, and I love how the guy says, "Someone get me that furry blue ball on the phone." I suppose I should be grateful he waited until the break to moon Creed. That's just great little moments. But anyway, after we get that moment of Senator Kelly says, "It would appear, Professor, you and I have more in common than I could have realized. I've always believed that underneath everyone's surface differences, we are all fundamentally the same. And to just see two people sit down, shake hands, and not necessarily be friends, but to find some middle ground." He even invites Xavier to dinner, which says, "I would love to go, but I have an appointment, maybe another time." And even Jean says, "I never thought I'd see the day those two would sit down and talk. Welcome to the 90s. Just a great kind of, as an X-Men fan, it was a nice break from all the action that we've been getting, but at the same time, building up all the tension for what's going to be happening with Fatal Attractions. And the artwork, oh my God, I cannot get over this panel. Now, as I said at the beginning of this review, I said we didn't know how good we had it. Now, before I use this comparison, I want to first preface saying that I love, hold on, make sure I pronounce his name right, Humberto Ramos' art. So don't get me wrong. Look at this. Look at this. And all through this time, through Wolverine, X Factor, X Force, Generation X, Uncanny, the artwork was on point. But then we start getting the more, I call it, like, it's not bad art. But this was around 2018, I think, somewhere along there. What was the print date on this? 2016. Artwork's not bad, but it's boxy. And it just felt like, as we got into the latter half of the 2000s, it's not lazy, but to me they look kind of like, what are those dolls in the toy section? The not the Living Dead dolls, but you guys know what I'm talking about. The Bratz. They look like Bratz dolls. Just the proportions look so off. Like they're trying to rush it. Still nice penciling, but I think what really kind of kills it is the coloring. Just makes it look like posing, and then it just looks stock compared to actual anatomy. And we used to get this in every single issue of X-Men up until 114 before Grant Morrison took it over. And don't get me wrong, the artwork in New X-Men was excellent too. But I noticed after that kind of slump, all the books started to look more, as I just pointed out, boxy and Bratz Dolly. And it just did not feel like the X-Men. I mean, look at Peter. He looks so dumpy. It's off-putting. I'm not I'm not bashing Humberto Ramos because I love his artwork, but it looks either too boxy, too anime-y. I just don't dig it compared to. I mean, look at the way Fitzroy and Fabian Cortez look, and even Peter. He looks strong physique, but it looks like anatomy compared to just something that feels a little rushed. And that's what I think it is. I notice that they try to push books out quicker nowadays, and so artists don't really get a chance to sit down and do what they used to do. But I just miss this classically trained look, and that's why I always tend to go back more to these than these, which we'll eventually go over. This book, it's not too bad. I love Jeff Lemire's run on Extraordinary X-Men, but I just wanted to give an example of why I miss this compared to how most art comics nowadays just kind of have this quick, rushed, more posing than actual anatomy artwork. That's just me. What do you guys think? What do you think of the old school X-Men? This is what I grew up with, so this is just what I miss and what I've loved and what got me into these damn books as a kid. If you guys have enjoyed what you've seen, please first and foremost support your local comic shop or wherever there's like to get your action figures and comics and grab this series. Highly recommend it. If you've enjoyed this review, really would appreciate if you take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Helps the channel more than you could possibly know. And if you don't mind hitting that fancy little X bell next to subscribe, that was actually to upload content. You guys get notified. Come to the channel, and I love talking with you and hearing your thoughts and feedback down in the comments or the socials, which I'll make sure to leave the links down in the description. So with all that said, hope you all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, everyone.